Good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of August. Welcome to all you guys out here. Make some noise. Make some more noise.
Come on. Woo!
There we go.
There we go.
Our book this month is Cotton's Secret of the Wind by Jim PASCOE, who we have sitting here right next to me.
Hello.
And Heidi Arnhold, who is on our video right there.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Heidi. Great book. I really like. Did you guys like this book? Yeah. Oh, I'm seeing some enthusiastic nods there. Yeah.
Isn't Heidi the best?
She's the artist. She's really good, isn't she? Yeah, really, really nice. Yeah.
You, sir, Jim.
We're always like this, by the way.
All right. Nice. Log rolling. I love it. Awesome. So let's start. Let's do a little kind of biographical of comics. Why comics? Where did you come from? Why do you do comics? What is it about comics?
I was reading comics when I was a very, very little kid, and that was in the 1970s. And there was a point in which I stopped reading comics. Maybe it's because I got a little bit older. I kind of don't even remember why I stopped reading comics. But then there was this moment when I was in high school where I started reading comics again. And the amazing thing was I had to really question, why did I ever stop? These are so fun. They're so good. That was, I would say, this was in a time where there was a lot of independent writers and artists making comics that I felt like were really cool. One of them was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, is when it first started. It was part of what a lot of people call the black and white boom. A lot of these independent comics were coming out. At the same time, the mainstream comics, specifically DC, were publishing these really cool books like Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns and Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore's Watchmen. And all of a sudden, it's like this love of comics became this shining light of like this is, like they were affecting me so greatly. I was like, I want to do this and give people the kind of joy that these things bring to me.
Nice.
And so I just became super obsessed with them, and as a lot of people who love comics often do.
Sure.
And then in college, I started thinking very sort of academically about comics. And in 1992, I got a grant from the National Endowment of the Humanities to do a conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on comics, film, and literature. And it was that sort of opportunity that allowed me to meet a lot of comics creators for the first time. And it really sort of felt like these were my people. Like, even though they were, most of the people that I was meeting were sort of much older than I was, maybe not much older, but sort of like the next generation above, it was just this kind of thing where it felt very right to sort of be doing that. So I just kind of really dedicated myself to trying to be the best writer that I could, and I just wrote constantly, and I've been doing it for a long time, and that's what has led to this.
Yeah. And this is your is not your first full-length book.
No, because comics are sometimes a little bit funny to count with collections and things like this, but I would say this is my 13th book, and that includes 2 murder mystery novels that I wrote back in the 90s. And it includes a lot of collections of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I wrote for about 2.5 years with Dark Horse, and an original series called Undertown, which I did with Tokyo Pop, which is during that time is when I met Heidi.
Okay, very good. Well, let's switch over to Heidi then, and ask you essentially the same question, Heidi. What's your background? Why comics?
Okay. It kind of started at a roundabout way for me, but I always have been drawing since I was a little kid, and I loved cartoons and art, and I loved Disney, and but it wasn't until a very unlikely spark, which was Sonic the Hedgehog. And so anyway, I started playing the games on the Sega Genesis with my brother. And then I discovered, hey, there's a cartoon on Saturday mornings. I love that cartoon. And then in 7th grade, once maybe every month or so, my parents and I would drive out of town about a half an hour because we didn't have a movie theater or a shopping mall or anything like that. And in this small town, there was a comic store. And I discovered, hey, Sonic has a comic. I got to get this. And so I just kind of dove into that. And at that point, I decided that's what I want to do. Because at that point, I was drawing Sonic all over everything and annoying so many people with my rabid fandom. So that was where it started. I made a fan comic, and it was on notebook paper. And I sent it to Archie, asking for a job as a 7th grader. And then I got my first rejection letter about a year later, and they were very polite about it. And they said that they weren't looking for any new artists right now, but they really appreciated my submission, and they wished me the best of luck. And then something just kind of stuck in that, where I'm like, you know what? I love drawing so much, and comics are so much fun. I want to pursue that as a line of work, and I'm going to work for Archie someday. I'm going to draw Sonic comics someday. And that has all gone out by the wayside now, but that kind of got me going. And through high school, I got really into reading manga, and then in college started reading American comics in addition, and made sequential art my focus in college, and met my first editor as a senior in college, and that kind of started everything. I ended up working with him about 6 months later.
Nice. Did you go what specifically for comics illustration?
I did. Yes, I majored in sequential art. Yeah.
Okay. Where at?
Savannah College of Art and Design.
Oh, okay.
Very good. Very good. We had an applause for that in the back. Very nice. Did you? It took you a year to get that first rejection letter. It sounded like.
Yeah. It's an eternity when you're a kid.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Did you? When you got that, were you like, I'm gonna go show them, or were you?
I wasn't defiant or anything. It was just kind of like, it took them so long. I knew already what that answer was. And I was like, what, I'm going to get better. And I'm not ready right now. And I drew it on notebook paper. I mean, what was I thinking? Yeah. So I'm going to give this another shot and just get better. Yeah.
I'm assuming you didn't keep a copy of that though.
Oh, I have it.
Oh, do you?
Oh, I have it. Yes. Yeah. I found it when we were downsizing, and it's now one of my treasured possessions.
Oh, that's nice.
And I actually have that horrible comic too. I found it. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely hold on to that. That's great. Yeah. That's awesome. So, how did you two get together to start doing this?
We met at San Diego Comic-Con. We had both had books out with Tokyo Pop. I did a series called Undertown. Heidi was doing a series on the Dark Crystal with Jim Henson's production. And we met at a bar after the show, and we were talking. And I like to ask people some crazy questions sometimes, and this isn't the craziest question, but I just as Heidi and I were talking, I said, if you could do anything in the world, what would you do? And it was really just kind of a conversation starter. It's not that I didn't want to know the answer, but I was just sort of making conversation. But Heidi answered with really laser focus. She was like, I would draw a comic about rabbits. Like it was really sort of like I could tell that there was not, she didn't have to think about it. It was like, this is the goal. And the next day when I was driving back to Los Angeles, where I live, I really couldn't get that conversation out of my head. And I thought that if I could write a story about rabbits that spoke to the kind of stories that I want to tell, but could also be a story that Heidi is interested in telling, then nobody in the world could draw that comic better. And And it was really immediately I got back to Los Angeles and emailed Heidi and said, I've got this crazy idea about a rabbit named Bridgebell. What do you think? And she was into it, and but with schedules and other things, it probably took us about 3 years to really make the decision that we really needed to move forward. I mean, I think that we may have done some sketches early on, or I continued with a little bit of story notes, and then I got distracted, and then she got a freelance job or whatever. But there was a moment where speaking for myself, I really just thought, it's almost like I asked myself the same question. I was like, you know what? Why do I write comics? What do I want to do? And if I could do anything in the world, what would I do? And at that moment, it was really clear. It was like, this story about Bridgebell is the thing that I want to do. Nice. And if I had all the money in the world, I would do it. And I thought, what if I, for a moment, pretended that I did have all the money in the world? What if I could get into that mind? I mean, I don't have all the money in the world, but just if I could be in that space, then what I could create is that dream. I could make that a reality. And I really thought, I don't care who tells me it's not commercial, or who says Nicolas Cage can't be in the movie, or it's not about any of that stuff. It is about, like, this is the story that I wanted to tell. And when I came to that point, I think that Heidi was in a very similar point to be very receptive to that idea, and that's what started it off.
Yeah. Would you have anything to add to that, Heidi?
Well, I mean, that first tagline that you gave me in 2010, I was just instantly sold. I just wanted to do it more than anything else. But I was also, we were having a hard time, like you said, lining up everything. I had some other freelance stuff in the works. I got married. Lots of crazy things happened in between that point and our starting point. But the thing that I find to be the most special is that the week that I realized, I all of those other freelance things that I had on my plate are behind me, and I had not forgotten Jim's project. Like, it had just been in my heart for a really long time. I was like, now is the time to start, and I'm going to email him this week on this day. And then he emailed me 2 days after that. Before that is, So it was kind of like it was fated to start at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, serendipity. You said his first tagline. What was the first tagline that he gave you? What was the pitch?
He said it was, and forgive me, Jim, if I butcher this.
It's all right. It's all right.
He said it was about a rabbit named Bridgebell, and she's trying to find her home in the Valley of the Clouds. And that's all he needed to say.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have the email that I sent to her back in 2010. And there are a couple things that aren't that don't sort of line up with how the book eventually came in. I think that because I was very interested in manga. I've been interested in manga for a long time, since I read Akira back in the 80s. I sort of had kind of envisioned it as that sort of Japanese tankobon kind of style, just like unending, just sort of travelogue, like there's this rabbit who's kind of lost in the wilderness and looking for something, and maybe there was a little bit of a nugget of that kind of thing that I was at least had in my head at the time. But as I started to develop the world that the rabbits live in, which is a world called Lavender, the story sort of, I let it lead me a little bit more, and it became less a travel story or a journey story. I mean, even late into the process, I sort of thought of it as, okay, Bridgebell is from this valley called the Vale of the Clouds, and it was destroyed, so she sort of has to find her way home, and it became kind of less about that. It became more about sort of what it became more of a coming of age story, where she was kind of trying to find what home meant. It became much more of an internalized journey home.
Well, I think it's also as much about what art is, and
I mean, absolutely.
yeah. And so, when did those themes start to come into it? I mean, as you were writing it, or earlier in the process?
I would say as I was writing it. I think that there's definitely that saying of write what you know, and I feel like I have for many years struggled with having a day job and writing at night. And under, you know, I feel like I've sort of made peace with that. Back in maybe 18 years ago or so, I quit my day job to write full time. I thought, like, because that's the dream, right? That's what you want to do. Like, and I did it, and I did it for about 2 years, and I realized this is harder than having a job. This is a job. this is not, you know, and not that I expected to sort of like stay in my pajamas and eat bonbons or you know something like that, but the amount of hustle that I had to do to make money to write kind of made writing not super fun. And in all back, what I was saying earlier about this magic of comics, somehow it was I was kind of losing focus of it, and so I thought that if I could like if I can have a job that paid me at least a little bit of money, then what I would be able to write would be I would not allow anybody to tell me if it was good or bad, or if it was acceptable or not acceptable.
Sure, because then you're doing the art for yourself as opposed for a commercial reason making money.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you know, again, I believe in commercial reasons. I want the book to sell, and I'm, you know, super happy to be with First Second, the publisher, who's very supportive. But to me, I think that there is a struggle with the artistic process that is about finding something to say and finding that the meaning in telling a story. I mean, I've told stories since before I could write. When I was a little tiny kid, I loved to tell stories. I loved to talk, as if you couldn't tell already. And I wanted it to be on my terms.
Yeah, that makes sense. Heidi, are you doing comics full time? You're lucky enough to make that work?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a husband with a stable job. That's
Very
the
good.
key. Yeah.
Very good.
Okay. You I think you said 2010. You.
It was the very
floated
beginning
this?
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you guys start working on it in earnest?
I'm going to say 2014. Like, we put the pitch together in 2013 and then launched into it 2014.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the first second offer was end of 14, or was it 15?
I feel like it was before. I think it was at the end of 13.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, we were lucky that the first second offer came together fairly quickly. Like once we had put together a proposal. My day job is in advertising, so I'm pretty good at selling things. So Heidi had drawn 3 full pages of comics. Which were in the, they're actually different because she redrew them for the final book, but they were in the same style, which is this very painterly kind of nod to 50s, 60s Disney films, because we were really sort of set on that's the vibe that we wanted. I think that once Heidi got into it, there was a lot of okay, how are we going to make this work and make it sustainable? But she did the 3 full pages of comics because it's very important to show your ability to tell a story sequentially. Even though, you could be a great artist, but I've found in comics that editors, and I just feel like even myself, it's you kind of want to see, can you tell a story?
Sure.
It's not just about can you draw great. And luckily Heidi can do both of those. And then she did a number of, because there are so many characters in the book, she did, at least 5 or 6, but maybe more like 7 or 8 character sketches that we then laid out. I was already sort of working on a lot of the kind of world building, a lot of which is at the end of the book. We kind of reformatted that proposal stuff to be a little in-world appendix. And then, I sort of had a couple publishers in mind, but we were lucky to have First Second make an offer first, and I love the books that they are were publishing and are still publishing, so it was a real no-brainer.
Yeah. So you started working on in earnest, I guess, 2014?
Yeah, I think that 2014 was when it really was like, okay, let's do this.
Okay.
And it's been a long road. It's there are 3 books in the series, so we probably spent about a year doing even though we were doing sort of pitch development stuff. Once the contract was signed, and it wasn't even like when the contract was signed, the editors, one of his original questions was like, how long is this? Like what? And so I had, it wasn't written, so I was kind of guessing, but I sort of said, just my gut was about 500 pages. I was a little bit like, I don't know, that seems about right. I don't know if I want to do it for the whole thing, for the whole thing, and I don't know if he got back to me and he was sort of like, well, like, do you think like 3 small, like 500, do you think you could do like 350, 160, like, does that feel right? And I was like, yes, that feels very right. I feel like I could definitely do 3 books. And so we spent about a year continuing to develop the world, continuing to develop the characters. I was, like I mentioned, working on the sort of the style of the art, the colorization, the technique, kind of how she was going to actually make it, which I'm sure she could speak to in terms of all the details. And then once we sort of had that kind of in place, I just began writing. I was very lucky to write all 3 scripts together. And I say that because, especially with working on Buffy, which was a monthly comic book, even more challenging with a TV show that was going on at the same time, that was very hard to sort of catch up to their production schedule, because and so we were outlining storylines and always trying to catch up with ourselves. It was very, very hard to and it was very hard to go back because it was a moving train.
Right.
This was this opportunity that while Heidi was drawing the first issue, I continued writing books 2 and 3, and so that when I was done and the first book wasn't yet finalized, it allowed me to go back and look at book 1 with new eyes.
Sure.
And obviously there was, we didn't want to redo art or change things that was already done just out of efficiencies, but it did allow me to, because the lettering was easy to change. All of that kind of got a different polish, and I think that there were maybe 2, maybe 3 scenes that we sort of like looked at to be sort of like, okay, this character turns out to be a little bit more important. Maybe we should establish them stronger in the first book. And it's I just feel like it's a real joy to me, having been in a situation where previously you kind of the book gets away from you a little bit. This is that opportunity where
you're actually able to polish it.
Yeah, and I really I've said this line before, and I mean it. The book may not be perfect, but it's as perfect as Heidi and I can make. I feel like there's just no regrets. There's no sense of like, now that I would have done this. Yeah. Like that we worked really, really hard to perfect it, and that's what I hope that what we've been able to achieve.
Nice. And so you're 2 books ahead then.
I am.
You're done.
I am.
You're
I don't know.
done,
I would call it done, but
done. Air quotes.
Yeah. I do have, even though I wrote the script for book 3, I mean, at least 2 years ago, right? I mean, it's been a long time.
Has it?
It's been a long time.
Please don't tell me that.
And you know, I feel like the first script probably went through, because I counted them. I kept counting. I think I did close to 15 drafts of the first script.
That's a lot.
And I mean, to be fair, maybe the last 5 were like kind of copy edity kind of things. But there were significant rewrites, and then book 2 even. I rewrote almost the entire book 2 because I had a fairly finished script that when I finished it I was like, this is great, and then just a couple weeks of sort of distance, and I was like, this doesn't make sense. Right. It's not right. So I knew that it's like, instead of just like tweaking it, you kind of really needed to sort of restructure.
I understand. Yeah. So you're writing full script?
Yes, it's very detailed, and I always mention in scripts that I write that I stress that this is a collaboration. This is not strict rules, and I'm just trying to express what's sort of in my head, and a lot of that is less about specific camera direction, although I do think that it's very specific in terms of the panel breakdowns, because I'm very conscious of how I want the story to pace and to flow. But especially with working with Heidi, what I sort of realize is that I obviously want to play to her strengths, and what I do less of is like, okay, this is like the rabbit is standing, or the rabbit is looking this direction, and more about this is what the rabbit is feeling.
Sure.
And the more that I can explain that, that's what I want Heidi to draw. I want her to draw those emotions, and I feel like that's. I mean, I don't know if it's because that's the way I do it or not, but it's like Heidi is able to capture these incredible range of emotions in these characters, and it's and so that's the kind of detail that I want to put into the script.
Yeah.
On your end, Heidi. How long does it take you to do a page?
Oh gosh. There's so many facets to it that it's kind of hard for me to gauge like an actual pace.
Sure.
And also you have to consider there's more line mileage on some pages than others.
Oh, absolutely.
So, oh gosh, I probably could do like one start to finish. I don't know, pencils, inks, maybe colors in a day. That seems like, I don't know if that's too fast for me, but I think I could probably do a full finished page in a day.
How long did it take you to do the 240? I mean, you have 240 pages here. Is this a year of your life? More? Less?
I'm going to say that's 2 years.
Okay.
We were in, the way that book was done is different than the way that book 2 is being handled. Okay. And there were a lot of steps that I cut out of book 2 to streamline that were not, that allowed, to be fair, they allowed me to do a little more as far as cleanup. And it's great to actually have, for design purposes and like for that beautiful trailer Jim had made, to have the characters and backgrounds be separate so you could actually do cool animatics with them. Mm-hmm. But that demanded a lot more work on my end to make that possible, and I'm not doing that this time. So I'm moving it a little bit quicker than I was before. Okay.
How do you work? Do you work pen and paper? Do you work all digital? What's your process?
Now I pencil the characters digitally.
Okay.
Technically, I thumbnail traditionally. I have about 8 pages on an 8.5, 11 sheet of paper. I scan those in and I set them up, and then I will pencil the characters digitally. And then I blue line everything, print it out, ink the characters first, then pencil the backgrounds around them. Traditionally.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I scan everything back in and color digitally and letter digitally.
I want to back up 2 steps there. So you're doing your thumbnails, and as you guys know, thumbnails are very, very small breakdowns that you put you put a lot of them on a page,
Sketches.
just so you can get an idea of how the page flows.
Yeah.
But then you said you scan those. I actually have never heard anybody say they do that. Why do you scan your breakdowns?
Because there's so much more life in them. And I actually already draw them to first, second spec. I'm really good at working very, very small. And it helps me to be able to think much better than working from a large. I used a thumbnail much bigger than this, or rough much bigger than this.
Thumbnails are lovely. They are.
Yeah, I love them.
They are beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Can you show us an example?
Let me just.
Since you've got the computer there.
Yeah, hang on just a second.
Yeah, no problems. I'll cover while you do that. So are you seeing the thumbnails as they're coming in, or
Absolutely.
you? Yeah. Okay.
So and then we have a very intense back and forth. Although usually it's just me telling her how great she is, but all during the steps of the process. So that would be the thumbnails, the pencil, the line art, and then the color. I give fairly detailed notes.
Okay.
In terms of, and again, usually it's I joke about the time. It's like most of the time I'm being critical. I'm criticizing things that I got wrong.
Right.
I'm sort of like, I told you to do this and that was a mistake. please do this instead.
That's funny.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I don't know why I actually got up, because I could just screen share on my computer. I don't know how well you guys can see these, but if you want me to.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are really. You can see those are really detailed.
Yeah, they're really tight. I like to keep them that way. So then when I pencil them, I don't have to change too much. It's literally just kind of adjusting poses,
Right.
other things that strike me as being wrong when I enlarge.
Okay.
Yeah, so I got a bunch of
They're really I mean, the thing is, they're kind of almost more cartoony.
Right.
Because they're smaller, and it's really fun to just sort of see how they there's like when in looking at when the line art comes in, and then especially the inked art. I mean, it's so much more rich and detailed and kind of finished looking.
Yeah.
But the thumbnails just have this real magic life.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's part of the artist's dilemma. So many artists just love their thumbnails, and then they bring it to the penciling stage, the finished line art stage, and they lose some of that the dynamic flow that they had, and that gestural quality, and it's so frustrating.
So you pencil in the computer digitally, and then you print it out and start inking it with an actual pen on paper. What is it? Why do you do that? What is it?
Well, it's just the characters specifically.
Okay.
But one of the things that I like about it is that if I catch myself say, "Oh, I drew that character's head way too small," I don't have to erase the whole thing. I can just select it and size it up. I can nudge things around, place them in a better place in space. It gives me a little more wiggle room than, say, penciling the whole thing.
Sure.
And then, because I did try that, and I thought, because admittedly, I don't like work on the computer very much. I very much love traditional stuff. And I want to minimize my exposure to the computer as much as possible. But I discovered that there are way too many issues where if I did make a mistake, especially if I noticed it too late and I've finished a whole bunch of stuff, I would have to erase everything. And then the page would be marred, and I'd have to worry about cleanup on that on the back end as well. So.
Right. So, and then you scan it back into the computer so you can color it. Yeah?
Yes.
Wow, so it's in and out of the computer.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Talk to me about your coloring a little bit, because it's one of the things that really struck me about this book is just your fantastic use of color here. These are all digital colors?
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually wanted to initially do it all traditionally in watercolor. And I did some test pages at the beginning that I really enjoyed doing. But again, when you have to consider scanning that back in, and the quality of your scanner, the capability of your scanner, things just weren't coming through very well.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I realized, okay, maybe I won't be able to get the nice color range that I'm getting on the physical traditional page. Maybe I can do an ink wash instead, and then I could put flat colors underneath that and still get that nice quality. But that came with a whole other set of problems. I would print out the pencils, it would make the ink bleed, or I would draw it on the actual pencils and it would wash the pencils out. So I decided instead to, I found Kyle Webster's brushes. He's widely celebrated by artists everywhere because he just makes these beautiful, beautiful brushes. And he had a watercolor brush that I use a lot for the background, and an ink wash brush that I use to shade the characters that just has this beautiful texture. And it works really well, I think, for what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful stuff. I think it's gorgeous.
Thank you.
It's so pretty. Let me go to the audience a little bit here. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah, you already have one right here.
Okay, so at the end, this character, whatever her name is, she wanted to keep the black sun away from Bridgebell.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why does she want?
Because that character Glee felt that the Black Sun was very, very powerful, and the power that he felt was so great that he felt like in the wrong hands it could be very dangerous, because an old comic book cliche from Spider-Man is, with great power comes great responsibility, and this idea that Bridgebell is such a natural talent, and that she's able to deal with these magical objects so well, kind of means that she may not be able to control it the way that some people or some rabbits would. And and because at the end of the book there is this sort of big kind of explosion, it scared this rabbit. It scared Glee, and he just kind of didn't know what to do other than like I have to hide this, and so I think that was kind of his motivation.
Very good. Another question? Yes, from the adult.
The creative process, are you working in Illustrator as well as Photoshop, or is this like, does the finished stuff all come out of Photoshop, or do you do the line work in Illustrator Vector and then?
Oh, it's all Photoshop.
It's all Photoshop.
I know nothing about Illustrator. I probably should.
Okay.
All of it is laid out in InDesign.
Right.
And then the lettering, which Heidi does in Photoshop, is retypeset in InDesign, and that's just a production thing. But yeah, no Illustrator. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've all talked about your like sort of childhood experience with comics and whatnot, and how that bridged into like your desire to actually produce comics. So consumption versus production, it's like something, there's such readily available sort of consumption at this point.
Yep.
Via any sort of electronic means or whatever. Talk about like the relationship between your consumption currently and production. Like how much inspiration do you get from the current volume of comics and whatnot versus your childhood?
I feel like it is extremely important. I've said this before, and I'll kind of use this as a slight tangent. If you want to write anything, comics, prose, books, movies, if you want to write, you have to do 4 things. You have to write, and it's amazing how many people who want to write that don't follow the first rule. You have to write, you have to read, you have to edit. It's very important in order to get perspective on your own writing, to be able to be in some kind of a workshop or some environment where you can criticize somebody else's work, because it's much easier to do, and that develops a skill set that is it's like a certain muscle that you need to be able to be self-critical. And the 4th thing that you need to do, even if you don't make comics, is you need to draw, because literacy is something that is well understood and well maybe not well taught in the entire country, but certainly I think that there is the value for literacy is well understood. Visual literacy is something that is extremely undervalued in this country. I mean, maybe even in the world. And the process of drawing, and I'm not even talking about draftsmanship, I'm talking about actually trying to put a pencil or a tool to a medium. The real process is about observation. It's about sort of either looking at something and saying, okay, I want to draw that bookshelf, or having the skills to be sort of like, okay, I know what a bookshelf looks like in my head, and I'm going to draw that. And so I feel like this quality of observing is something that will serve you very, very well as a writer. And so going back to sort of point number 2, which is gets to your question, I think that it's extremely important to continue a sense of input, even if your current goal is to create output. And I've known many writers in my years of doing this who kind of very just matter of factly be sort of like, I don't have time to read anymore. I'm too busy writing. I can't read. I used to read. Now I don't read anymore. I don't buy it. I do appreciate that you can get to a certain level of skill where you kind of don't need to do it, but I am always reading things, and some of them are comics. I was just telling Brian I'm reading Tilly Wallman's Spinning, which is another second book, which is absolutely spellbinding. I'm super loving it. I'm almost done with it. But I also read fiction prose books. Everything from sort of like old scary ghost stories from the early 20th century to contemporary science fiction. And I do feel like all of that continues to inspire me. It's like I read something, and it's not so much the ideas that inspire me. It goes back to what I said about being a kid loving comics. When I read a piece of fiction that is truly moving, it takes my breath away. It's just like, I'm like, whoa. And that's the feeling, like, it's like, that's gold. I want to, like that, it's like alchemy. It's like, I want to create that. That's the magic. It's like, if you can create this sense of wonder and excitement and that gasp of breath, that is the end goal. And so, I don't know that I would ever forget that feeling. But if you don't read, I feel like you push yourself further away from that, and it's not something I'm interested in doing.
Yeah. Are you staying up on comics, Heidi? Do you?
As best as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I miss it, actually. I miss reading them with the voraciousness I used to read them.
Yeah.
Because when you're making them all the time, and deadlines are looming, it's kind of difficult to take time for yourself and really feed yourself that way, to inspire yourself, remind yourself why you love what you do. And I try to fit things in here and there. There's a webtoon I'm reading called Space Boy by Stephen McCraney. I read Jason Brubaker's Sithra in the past year, and that was really, really great. Tyson Heath's Diesel, I really enjoyed. But aside from those 3, I'm still fighting to carve that time. Most of the time it's absorbing beautiful pieces that I see of artists' work on Twitter, when I get a moment. But it's absolutely important to see other people making and telling really, really good stories and making good art, and it just kind of it inspires you and it teaches you, and you want to experiment, and to have that fire stoked is so important. So for me right now it's kind of up and down. Unfortunately, I think I'm more on a downswing, but I gotta get back into it and read it more.
Can I ask the audience, what are you guys reading? Any favorite books that you've read recently? Yes.
Right now I'm reading Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. I think
Awesome.
That's a good book.
Cool.
That's cool.
I tried to read My Little Ponies, although they don't have them much at the comic book store.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Yes, sir.
Right now I'm reading Egyptian mythology.
Oh,
Nice.
wow.
Nice. A well-read group of kids.
I'm telling you. Yeah. And in mythology, I like that a lot.
Yeah, I like that too. Heidi, I mean, obviously you're working on a book like Cotton's, and it's all animals and wilderness, and are you out there in the woods looking for inspiration, or is it all coming from your heart? Do you have a rabbit in your house?
Yes, I do. She's taking a nap right over there. So she's kind of my little muse, more often than not. And I actually, I live, my complex is it's directly next to a park. So I get to go, I can vanish into the woods if I need to have a refresher. And honestly, as far as like the terrain in this, it's very much inspired by, parks like Yosemite. And so I look up stuff from that all the time, images, and actually this has caught me going down a weird road where I watch a lot of thru hikers on YouTube hiking the PCT, and it's kind of sparking something in me. Once this is done, I think I might become one of those people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm just constantly absorbing nature stuff. I follow a Twitter account called Hourly Fox, and I save more photos on my phone of foxes than I take pictures, I think.
Okay.
I absorb however, and it's really helped me to, I've always been kind of outdoorsy, but I have forgotten that in the past 12 years or so of working in comics, because, it's very indoors and sedentary. Yeah. And it's reinvigorated my love for that. So I kind of can't wait to go out and absorb more and maybe have that inform what I do. So
you've got a really nice balance between realism and obviously you're showing emotions on these characters' faces, and animals tend not to show emotions like that.
Right, yeah.
Where are you pulling that from, I guess?
Yeah. It was just more or less wanting to convey the emotions, and also I didn't want to slide too far into anthropomorphism. I really love, I think animals are beautiful just as they are, but you also need them, especially in this case, when they are operating, like they're making things with their hands, they're operating machinery. So you kind of have to take some liberties with it. Yeah. So it came from a functionality aspect, and also I wanted to connect emotionally with the characters. So they, my initial designs for them have changed up until now, and it's just more or less like, okay, now I'm connecting. Yeah. And so, especially, the eyes are much bigger. I mean, you look at a rabbit and you look at those soulful eyes, you feel like they're really big, but in reality, they're quite small. Yeah. Just humanizing them just enough so that we can connect to them.
Yeah. Did you have any tricks in writing the script where you hit a point of like, oh wait, rabbits can't do that?
I would say more often than not. Uh-huh. And it was funny because there is this. I would say that one of the challenges of writing is that I'm not the one who has to draw it, mm-hmm. right? And so it's like it's easy for me to get into my head to say things or even to just use expressions.
Yeah.
Like he would reach into the pack, or he would, or turn the knob, and then it's a little bit like, well, how is that character going to do that? And then even I think Heidi and I both wanted the characters to be as natural as possible. But it kind of became important that it's like they kind of needed a pack or something to carry things mm-hmm. in, because there were times where I would be like, he would pull this out, and it's like, well, where do you pull it out of? Yeah, exactly. It's like, where does that happen? I feel like this is a good example of sort of Heidi keeping me honest, where mm-hmm. it's like I'd write the script, and she would be sort of like, I don't know about this. Like, what do you mean? Like, or how would this character do that? And then, and either it turned into more world building because we would sort of say like, okay, well, you know, do they have the ability to do this, or have they developed this kind of technology? Or we would say, okay, well, we don't want that to be the case, and so how do we make this plot point happen?
Sure,
You know, how do we
sure.
get from A to B and make those events fall in line?
Sure. One of the words Heidi used before, you guys may not really know, it was anthropomorphism, which is essentially taking something that's not human and making it like it's human so that we can relate to it better. Did you? I want to ask you guys how you felt the sort of the realisticness of the rabbits are, because these are very realistic creatures, right? Dealt with like how it was in relationship to the sort of the fantasy of the story. Does that make any sense? Go ahead.
I kind of felt like they were just humans. They like I like you could have changed the art for the rabbits to be humans and it would have been the same thing. Like.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Interesting. Anybody else have a thought on that? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it sort of feels like they're just like magical creatures walking around and talking.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Were you, and this is the other question that I had for you guys, that, you know, and it was the only thing that worried me about this book is there's the scene where the fox kind of bites a rabbit in some pretty bloody ways. Was that scary for you guys? Was that
Not really. No, too violent.
too violent?
The
Too
song
violent?
in the beginning?
Yeah, that scene in the beginning.
The beginning is pretty creepy, and then there's also the fox attack at the end, which is pretty violent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who thought it was too violent?
Show of hands.
Okay.
Just one. Okay.
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 You know, I think that it was something that we definitely discussed in the process. I mean, I would not say in any way it was a casual decision. It's important to establish the stakes in this world, and we knew that the foxes are meant to be dangerous, and so it's a combination of. I think that we agreed right away that instead of just being sort of like, oh, the foxes are scary, like run away from the foxes, that we needed to see something that was like, don't mess with the foxes. This is serious. But then even more, it's sort of like as the story progresses and as you saw that initial thing that was kind of scary, we wanted something at the end or toward the end to be aggressive, to shake you up, and to say that this is serious, and I stand behind that, like that desire to do something that feels maybe a little bit too much, because the truth is that's what violence is. Violence is not okay.
Yeah.
And
it is scary.
And it is scary. It's not. And when you're grown up, it doesn't become less scary.
No.
It maybe becomes normalized, and that's almost more scary. The truth is, when people or creatures are hurt, it's bad. And this is a story where you want to understand that badness. There is a force of good that is struggling against that, and I do feel like there's a real message for me personally of love in this book. That this book is really about using that love, the love of art, the love of making things, the love of imagination, to overcome all of the struggles of life. And whether that struggle is the monotony of work or going to school, which sometimes can feel very unfun and very not magical, or something traumatic, like a death or like an injury. Those things do happen in this world. and there are ways to overcome them, because we have to, as a people, to continue on. We have to face these things and overcome them. And I think that we do that with love.
Yeah.
And so it's important to sort of show that darkness, to show how much it can be overcome.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. Our hour is basically up. Do we have any last questions from our wonderful audience? I got 2 questions, looks like. Yeah.
Okay, so I was just wondering. So I saw 2 ways of activating these like thokchas or whatever.
Okay.
I saw one twisting. Like in the beginning of the book, someone twisted it, and in the end or like the middle, croquet threw it. So which way?
Interesting. What do you think?
I don't really care. I think the twisting is more efficient.
You think the twisting is more efficient? Yeah.
I like that answer.
Yeah, I think that I think that one of the things that we're trying to do in the whole book is honestly not explain a lot of things, because it's important that you take, because I feel very strongly that you guys are part of the creators too. When you read this story, and I think this is to me the magic of comics, in a way that is very different from film, very different from prose books. When you read comics, you are making it move. You're bringing it to life, and so I would say sometimes you can see a rabbit maybe twist something, or sometimes it looks like maybe a different movement, but I feel like as you read, you're the one activating the thokcha. And so I think it's less about finding the specific answer, and finding the answer in yourself. Your question.
In the start of the book, Bridgebell makes a little focus,
Yeah.
and I was just very curious about what it is.
Well, I think that's actually a very big question, because if you think about thokchas as objects of beauty, then it's almost sort of like, well, what is any piece of art? You could say that a painting is something where people have taken paint and drawn something, and maybe that drawing is something that looks like another object, like flowers or a pretty waterfall, or sometimes it doesn't look like anything. It's just colors splashed on the canvas. But at the end of the day, what is the point of a painting? You could argue that it's just to be beautiful, but I think that is the question you're asking is a really good question, because I think it's a question that Bridgebell herself is asking, is that she likes to make these things. I think that she thinks that they're cool and that they're pretty, but I think that there are a lot of other rabbits in her world that don't know why she makes them. They don't feel like there's any point to make them, and that hurts her feelings, because she likes to make them, and so I can't tell you what it is or why it is any more than I can explain why people write books, or why people put on plays or act in movies. It's somebody might say it's because they have to do it. They're inspired to do it. But I do feel like it's the people that make things that make the world go around. That the creating art creates our world.
No, that makes sense. In the second and third books, do you go into this more?
Yes, I think that very much. I think that the first book, The Secret of the Wind, is about different kinds of artistic struggles. Mm-hmm. I think that Bridgebell, who's the main character, the main rabbit, is very much an artist who is looking for external validation. She wants somebody to tell her that she's good, that what she's doing is worthwhile. And then there's a character named Tom Croquet who, even in a world that doesn't particularly like art, seems to be sort of like somebody who is doing it full time or is successful, whatever that may mean. But to him, it's not good enough because he feels like he wants to do something that's better and better and better, and that struggle is very, very real. But I think that maybe my favorite artistic struggle is actually Glee. And Glee's a little boy rabbit, who feels like he's not artistic at all. And he doesn't understand art, he doesn't do it, he doesn't necessarily appreciate it. But that struggle is perhaps the most real, because all of us are artists. Everything that we do is making something, whether it's making breakfast in the morning or whether it's doing your homework. It's like this, the process of making things is magical. And I think that Glee is struggling with that, so, sort of understanding that. I'm not sure that in a way he comes to a certain, and I think this gets to the young boy's question. I think he comes to a little bit of a fearful realization at the end about, like, well, what does this is all feels too much, too big, too much to handle. And I think that the where the second and the third books go is this deeper exploration of these kind of artistic struggles, and how the kind of coming of age story evolves into those different stages of self-awareness.
Nice. Well, you guys like this book a lot, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. You wanna read more? You want to read a second and third one? Looking forward to it. Okay. Great. Awesome. Oh, we got another question.
After Croquet's father drowns himself,
Yeah.
why does the Broken Feather King come and save him from the...
Well, so a couple clarifications. John Croquet, which is Croquet's father, does not die, but he comes very, very close. And when he does, the sort of the powers of the other side, from the land of the dead, try to come and take him because he's very close to that doorway. But it's not his time to go, and so he is rescued by a creature made of fire called Gra-La-La. And Gra-La-La is very mysterious, and there's not a lot of answers for who Gra-La-La is in this first book. He is sort of talked about amongst the rabbits as kind of like a boogeyman, like, be good or Gra-La-La will get you. But the fact that Gra-La-La actually saves this little rabbit is confusing, is because, like, that doesn't seem like what a boogeyman would do, and so that's that confusion of the mythology, the fact that the stories that these rabbits are telling may not be true, is part of the story of this book, and certainly part of the story of the second and third book.
When do we have a date for book 2 and 3?
You know what? I don't feel like it's officially been announced, but I do believe that it's on the schedule for July 9th, 2019.
Okay. Okay. So it's not that far away. A year.
Well, yes.
Little less, but you guys can you guys wait for a year for the next one? Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming out.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I want to thank you guys for coming out. I want to thank you for dialing in. This is a fantastic book. This is a beautiful book. If you are sitting here watching this at home, sometime after we've recorded this, which a lot of people do, hie thyself to a comic store or a library or a bookstore, get a copy of Caught in the Secret of the Wind. It's a gorgeous book. I really think that Jeff Smith's quote on the cover kind of sums it up really nicely. It's like The Wind in the Willows and Animal Farms together in one great graphic novel, and that really that's a kind of a perfect quote for this.
It really is. Very, very happy to have gotten such kind words.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith.
So this was our September book. Our August book. Our September book next month is Sheets right here. And in fact, we have copies if you guys want to get it early this week. This is a really good book. You guys are going to like this book a lot. And then we have Brenna Thumler, the creator of Sheets. She's going to be here September 23rd.
Yay.
So make a thing for that, because I think you guys are really going to like this book. I think the adults should actually think the adults should read both of these books. I don't say that a lot about the kids' books, but these are both really, really excellent books. And so we hope to see you then for that. Again, thank you, Jim, for coming out.
Sir.
Thank you, Heidi, for
Thank you guys.
participating. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next month.